All right. Cool, man. So that's your work truck?
Yeah. Yep. I'm a handyman or facility maintenance, I suppose is the real term.
Oh, okay. And where are you physically right now?
Right now, I'm in Richmond, Virginia. So, yeah, my wife and I and roommate moved out here. Next month it'll be a year.
And where did you move from?
Uh so I'm from Nebraska and we were living there before we came out here. So, I like it
And
out here, the big city.
what brought you out there? Was it work or was it?
It was a couple different things. So work was one big factor. A guy got me this job, and there was a group of people out here that I was familiar with that are liberty-minded folks,
Oh,
and
okay.
came out to visit them a few times. And then I was like, okay, I'm compelled to go live near them. So that's kind of like a short story.
That's a pretty good reason to move somewhere, better than most people's reasons for moving. A lot of the times it's just
Totally.
uh,
Right.
awesome that you have that community. I think that's something that a lot of us don't have, right? We find it on Discord. We don't have anybody in our actual, real life that we can talk about these things. That's cool.
It is absolutely so. The guy that made the group, or one of the founding members, like one of okay, I joined the military when I was 22. Um, I discovered his video on YouTube, and it just like even thinking about it now, I still get goosebumps. But I was like, these are the types of people that I really feel like because he was in the Air Force, and so after he got out, he made a video of him burning his uniform, and he was like, I'm gonna actually fight for what I know is real freedom now, not be tricked. So that was powerful to me because same thing happened.
What branch were you in?
I was in the army, and so I was an Abrams tank mechanic. So I turned a lot of wrenches.
I bet, man. And how long were you a member of the armed services?
Uh, 4 years. So I didn't renew my contract at all. I knew that I had to get out because I got in 2010 and WikiLeaks started to come out and everything and get pretty popular. Well, not necessarily popular, but I discovered the WikiLeaks and I knew that this wasn't for me any longer.
Something that I heard, I think it was Alex Jones say that police and military tended to have a higher percentage of people that were awake or red pilled. And maybe that's counterintuitive to some people, right? But I thought maybe at some level it made sense, right? Because for a lot of people, if you're just civilian and you're not forced to ever confront anything. But in the military, you actually see stuff. Maybe you're closer to how the government operates, and maybe you have reasons to think about stuff more deeply. I don't know. I mean, do you think that's true? Do you think that's Alex Jones was correct in that observation, or not really?
I think that in that case, absolutely, because when you are the tool or the medium that does the action, uh more questions, it's easier for questions to come to the forefront, right? When you're just like, oh, my cousin's over there, I support him regardless or whatever. It's easy to just be like, well, of course they're doing what's right. But you know, it's more questions is always the key rather than less. So that's what I found myself doing, and that's why, I didn't make rank super fast or anything like that because I questioned things and they didn't appreciate that always.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So my father-in-law was kind of a career army guy. He was in fact in the armored division, um, and he surprises me sometimes with how open he is to some of these ideas. I mean, he's not really all the way there, but I can talk to him about certain things. And I guess he saw enough things that made him question. He was actually in Vietnam, and he has a couple of stories of like orders that he was given that were like blatantly contradictory and kind of horrific. So um, So, anyways, and then the other one is I've got also from my wife's family a sheriff. He surprised me. He's a retired sheriff. He was sheriff in um, uh, I forget which county down south from where I am. But anyway, again, surprises me sometimes with his idea. Like I don't think he's not an anarchist. Anarchist, he's not there, but
Right.
he surprised me sometimes with his personal. His stance on personal freedom and personal responsibility and that sort of thing. And it makes me think that he's seen, you know, enough stuff that he's had to think about. He knows what violence actually looks like. And it isn't having a different opinion, right, to start with. So.
Exactly, right? From like a sheriff perspective, so even from like a soldier's perspective, that last step of being like, no, government is the part that makes it immoral, right? That's a huge leap, and you have to take it for yourself. And it took me a minute too, because I was like, no, government or anarchy, that's chaos. It's like, well, it's chaos because everybody can make their own decisions, and it's chaos from their perspective.
Right.
But yeah.
So can I ask? So you're in the armed forces. You're in the army, and then you saw this video, and on the basis of that video, you started questioning. Is that what happened, or were there other things that?
So originally I was huge into Ron Paul,
Mm,
in 2008, but I was 16 or 17 years old, so I never voted, but I was in a position. I'm from, like I said, Nebraska. It's the town I'm from is a town of 1,000 people,
mm,
and then I grew up. I worked in the grocery store, and I got kind of like trapped in the small town. I felt like a glass ceiling mentality, so
mm.
I was like, oh, well, my dad was in the Marines also. So I was like, okay, well, this is a logical step. And so I went there, did that. I also met my wife at the same time that I decided to sign up. So that was kind of interesting. I was running away from a different girl also. So I ended up joining, and then I went to Korea first off. So once I got my orders, I'm like, man, there's no way I'm going to be able to take my wife if I don't get married. So we got married, and then she came with me to Korea for our first year, and yeah, and then I went to Colorado after that, and I deployed from there, and then I got out and left Colorado and went back to Nebraska, and then I was trying to collect my GI Bill, try to go to community college, and I was on my way to school one day and I wrecked my motorcycle and I was laid up for about 2 months. So this really got me back into like the liberty mindset, I suppose, because I had nothing else to do. You know, military, they like thinking for yourself's not encouraged. So I was like stuck in that. But being laid up and everything, I had a lot of time. And then that's how I discovered his videos. After the motorcycle accident wasn't my fault. I ran into a semi because he was doing a U-turn, and so I got my settlement from that, and that was how we funded our first trip out here to visit. And then from then, it was like, okay, we have to come live in Virginia. But yeah,
Uh,
what part of California are you in? I was gonna ask.
I'm in the dreaded San Francisco Bay Area, so I'm in Oakland. I live and work in Oakland. I've more or less grew up in Oakland, so we moved here when I was fairly young. So it's the area that I know. Um, I used to, really like it, and when I was younger, right, I thought San Francisco was really cool, so I used to spend time there. But given the political climate, right, it's true. It's very well. I think in the cities, it's hard to find people that are maybe of a different mindset. So as I'm saying that, I'm thinking of the guy who heads our department here, right? So it's engineers. They tend to be kind of conservative, but full on NRA member, and he's very proud of the fact that he has a weapon collection. But he's rare, and he's definitely stands out for that.
All right, that's good though.
Yeah, no, he's here. And what's funny is that when I started, my thinking had not yet changed. So I used to think of him as like a weird gun loving kook, probably dangerous. Gotta watch out for that guy, right? And then I'm learning history, and then my position on all that changed drastically. So now, yeah, now I'm more in agreement with him. I haven't been able to have a conversation. I'm kind of curious about I want his advice on my next gun. He kind of collects, classic pistols and stuff. So he goes to gun shows. He talks about it, and you can tell almost everyone else is maybe not entirely on board, but he's the main guy, so do whatever.
Who's gonna call him out?
Yeah. So, um, so I have got an ally. Um, and it's interesting what you're telling me because it sounds like you had a bit of time to think about stuff. And there was this change and this different perspective. So it was kind of similar for me. It was a staycation many years ago. So I had time off, but no place or money to go anywhere. I'm just at home. And it was just having that break from the rat race, start looking at things. So yeah, I started just, it was, the internet. I think it was David Icke. So I came across some of his videos, right? And some of it started making sense. I was like, oh my God, I think he's right. I think we don't have news, it's propaganda, right? He had a couple of videos on that. And yeah, but it was having that freedom or that time away from the daily grind. You can get a little perspective, and I started looking at things. So it's kind of similar for that for me.
Right? Yeah, David Icke just recently got purged. He had an independent filmmaker come do a documentary on him or a show on him, and yeah, they're like going after his venues and everything. And it's an like he had nothing to do with the production. I saw that the other day. Uh, a guy I follow on YouTube was interviewing him. So
Was that
yeah,
Luke Rudkowski or Rudkowski?
Radowski. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I saw the headline, but I haven't actually seen it. Saw the video, and no, just in general. I mean, John Rappaport this morning also sent out an email. His blog was taken down with no warning, and and he's even less. I mean, he is, as far as I know, just an investigative journalist who had, well, he was critical of the medical cartel. He spent a lot of time looking at that, but I don't know that he was terribly controversial otherwise. Whereas David Icke, I mean, I credit him. He was one of the first people. He was out there pumping out information. Um, I'm not sure that I'm totally on board with the aliens part. That's where I would get off.
Right.
But
Yeah.
who knows? Maybe I don't know. But that's where all of a sudden things got a little bit strange. But still, I mean, I think I've got like 4 or 5 of his books. I've bought his books and stuff. So I think he's got a right to make an argument for his theories. So that's some scary stuff.
Is he the lizard? Does he think lizard people or aliens?
You know what? I'm not really entirely sure if they're like other dimensional beings that we've come to call demons, but they're really other dimensional. I'm not. Yeah, I'll be honest. I don't know. I'm not well versed
Right.
in this.
So if it was the lizards, that makes sense to me because like what he's saying is they're cold blooded and
Right.
they're separated from the actual like the things that they put down to the peons. You know, us, like you said, people that have to do the actions are usually radicalized or they have to dilute themselves. They either have to turn to booze or drugs or alcohol or hurt themselves. So, like, if you look at it as lizard people because they're cold blooded and they're awful, that makes sense to me in that context.
Yeah.
But
For the longest time, in fact, I remember I was struggling with that idea because I wasn't sure if he meant it as a metaphor only or if he meant it literally. I think at one point I began to as I understand it, I think he means it literally, but I thought, oh man, it works perfectly as a metaphor. They're cold blooded, maybe they're subhuman, right? They're not superhuman, they're subhuman because I think they're lacking something that makes us human, right? Empathy. So I think they're inferior to us, not the other, but they see it the other way, of course. Yeah. They're predatory and um, but I'm not entirely sure.
right, it's interesting. I'm glad to be, on the I don't know why they have to live at the expense of others. Like to be a superhuman would be to live at the like to live to help others to make others better. But I don't know. I'm a weirdo, I guess, compared to them.
You're too human. So, and I guess I gotta say, When I first, the reason I reached out originally is because you posted a screenshot of your workspace, and I thought, hey, that looks like Linux, man. So, so I'm curious, what distro are you running, or what flavor?
So this kind of brings it full circle, right? That same motorcycle accident that kind of
Mhm.
made me back into Liberty movement. I had my laptop on my back in my backpack, and for some reason it deleted my Windows key. Like I couldn't
Mm.
recover my Windows at all. So I gave my laptop to my friend, and he was like, There's nothing I can do. I could put Linux on here for you." I was like, "All right." So he put Ubuntu 16.04 was the first one I used, and right now I'm using 18.04. So,
Okay.
and I don't think I could ever go back. I never want Windows to, you know, Windows update when you don't want it or
Right.
anything like that. But there are a lot of barriers. So, luckily it fits my personality and I'll just like figure it out. But I can see how it's not for everybody, but it's getting a lot better. What about you? Are you using Linux on this computer you're running?
No, so I'm at work, and this is my work computer, and I actually thought about bringing my home computer, but it's just too much work. Um, and in the past, what I used to do is I used to make my work computers dual boot, and so far nothing's ever happened, nothing's gone wrong, nobody's been the wiser. But maybe as I've gotten older, it's like, yeah, this will be the one time that I destroy the machine. I have to explain to IT why I need a new laptop, or they need to spend a day rebuilding it. So it's just at home. I'm running. So I didn't update for a long time. I've run Ubuntu. I was a big fan of Ubuntu. I've run a bunch of them. In the beginning, the only distro that would install successfully and somewhat easily was Red Hat. So I ran Red Hat for a while, and then Ubuntu came out, and I liked. I guess it was more use. It was just kind of pretty. Like Red Hat was really intended for like servers, and
Right.
was kind of bare bones, and it took a lot of work to get it to look kind of cool, and partially that was the appeal, right? You can tinker with Linux. So I used to spend way too much time setting up all this stuff. Where I wanted the transparent windows and the special effects and the rotating cube when you change the workspace, all the cool stuff, right? And then but Ubuntu just kind of like worked. So I ran Ubuntu for a long time, and then last time I reinstalled Linux Mint, kind of the darling. So that's what I have right now. Um, but I also realized, when I started running OBS and Discord for autonomy, they're available on Linux, right? As I guess I'm sure you know. I was kind of surprised. That's the limit with you mentioned limits, right? It's the problem with Linux, like maybe so that you can't, like video games, oftentimes, or anything from Microsoft. Yeah, they're not a fan of Linux. So
Right.
crap, and then oh, look at this, Discord and Zoom even, and all this stuff runs on Linux. But then I realized my install was old. I installed it, I don't even know, 4 or 5 years ago, and never updated it. So I'm running a really old versions of software. So um, I installed it to the latest Linux Mint, but I hadn't really looked at the distros. There's this one called MX Linux that I guess is the darling. So I might install that next just to see what it's like. But that's where I'm at.
You're not one of the hardcores and only install Arch.
Oh, you know what? I think I attempted it once, and yeah, it was like too much work. And even I'm not a CS major, and I never dug that deep into it. Like when I first started playing with Linux, it did take a lot of effort. Like maybe I would get it installed, but there was no GUI, and I'd have to sit there and just poke and prod and see if I could get the X server up and running. And then, so in the beginning, it was definitely more work than I think I could devote to it now. But luckily, they just there's been so many improvements. I mean, I think installing Linux at this point is just so much easier than even getting Windows installed.
I agree. You're back into it when it used to be way hard. Now your skills, you probably like breeze right through it.
I haven't had to use a command line much, so that's the other thing I was noticing. Like I'd forgotten whatever Linux foo I had going on. I just lack of use, But yeah, I mean, back in the day, I think I was more comfortable with the command line, than now. So because it's worked so well for so long. So yeah. So can I ask, what is it that you like about Linux?
Oh man. So yeah, I can get almost anything I want to work on it usually.
Hmm.
So, and then I was very glad that my friend like put me onto this because do you know what a Raspberry Pi, the
Yeah,
single board, right?
yeah, yeah.
So I was visiting my brother out in Colorado one time, and he took me to his friend's house, and he had this little single board computer, and he's like pulling up all these TV shows and everything. I'm like, what is this? He's like, it's a Raspberry Pi, and it's this open source software. So I'm like, all right. So I bought one, and I made my
Mm.
first like media center out of a Raspberry Pi,
Sweet,
and
sweet, yeah.
luckily, yeah, I knew a lot of Linux already, so that helped. And then I was like, so I started studying Raspberry Pis. I started seeing all the projects you could make with Raspberry Pis. So now, like, I have a network DNS blocker at the house. I
Mm-hmm.
have, um, I don't know if you've ever heard of, there's a thing called Open Bazaar, and it was a spin off of the Silk Road. Are you
Okay.
familiar with the Silk Road?
I am with the Silk Road, not with the other one. That was
All right, so Open Bazaar forked the Silk Road's code basically, and then changed it. But it's an application you can run, and they're trying to do like eBay with Bitcoin, where there are no restrictions, you know, as much as possible. So I made my own little Raspberry Pi Open Bazaar server because
okay.
you can only host your store if you're connected. So I was like, oh, well, Raspberry Pi is $30. It can always be connected and always be turned on. So yeah, just a lot of Raspberry Pi projects and good stuff like that. I make a retro gaming station out of Raspberry Pi. A lot of stuff.
That's cool, Matt. So I'm familiar with it. I've never bought one. I mean, I've been on the fence. I've been close a couple of times because for the longest time that was a promise. We'd go from open source software to open source hardware, and so anyways, and if you like to tinker, this is the dream. But I guess at some point I didn't have time to really devote to it. But I've always followed it because I think it's so cool, man. Like that's well, if you're interested in tech, I mean, and it's all accessible, and you can drill down as much as you want, as little as or as much as you want into how these things work. So, um, I've probably been on the fence. I've almost ordered it a few times, and then I thought, like, well, I don't know what I'm going to do with it. That's cool, man. I'm jealous. So, what other projects have you built with your Raspberry Pi?
So the next one I'm gonna build, and I'm probably not gonna use a Raspberry Pi for the next one. I'm gonna go with a slightly more powerful single board computer. Um, I am a very hardcore firearms advocate myself, so I bought a Ghost Gunner. If you're familiar with that machine,
I'm not. No.
okay. So it's a tabletop milling machine. So a CNC milling machine, and it's single purpose built mostly. A guy, he was inspired by Julian Assange. His name is Cody Wilson, and he's now in jail for
Mm,
something, not very smart. But anyway, he made himself a target, then he got caught. So he made this. He was trying to release the files to 3D print the Liberator, which is the 3D printed gun. Have you heard of that one?
I've heard that there was such a thing, but I don't know any of the details.
Okay, so he used that as publicity, like the Streisand effect, to get the media to freak out. So then the government said, no, you can't post these plans on the internet for free. If you charge people, that's fine. You cannot post it for free.
Okay.
So I think he's a lawyer by trade. And so he launched an offensive lawsuit. So he needed a way to fund his lawsuit. So he got his engineerish type buddies and they designed, so they started with the term wiki weapon. They wanted to open source weaponry.
Mm-hmm.
So they brainstormed and they came up with a tabletop milling machine where you can buy an 80% lower. So it's a hunk of metal, according to the ATF, but it's 80% of the lower part of an AR-15. And then you put it in this machine and you poke some buttons and then it finishes it and then you assemble it and then you've built your own rifle and you don't have
Mm.
to have the magic numbers from the government or anything like that. And self-building of firearms is legal almost everywhere. Now, in California, if you were to make an AR-15, there's all sorts of compliancy things, like you got to have special magazines, you can't have a magazine release, but yeah, but you can build it yourself technically.
That's cool. That's cool, man. Yeah.
So I'm going to get a stronger single board computer, and it's just going to be hooked up to that machine all the time instead of having to hook my laptop up to it and disconnect it all the time.
So it's going to manufacture, I guess, the plastic pieces that go on the top of the weapon, or does it actually? I mean, how does it work?
Yeah, so um it's a milling machine, so it could do metal, but it can mill out plastic.
Oh, I
And
see. Okay,
people,
gotcha. Yeah.
right? People have made, oh, it can make handguns now too, like Glock style handguns, and those are plastic frames. So yeah, it's pretty versatile now. They even have a program where you can do engraving.
Yeah, no, and actually, and I'm sorry, I guess it didn't register properly, but a milling machine. So now that opens up, you can make just about anything. I mean, that's pretty cool. Um,
That's good. The bed's small, unfortunately, but it's still pretty awesome.
and what about like the barrel itself? I mean, is that part? Can you manufacture that? Doesn't because I imagine that needs to be very accurate, and I don't know if that can come out of a.
So this only manufactures the part that government says has to have the magical numbers. So everything else you just buy off the shelf, and nobody like, so this is just the part where they put their, yeah, so there's color of law and there's what is it? Color of law and word of law. I don't remember.
The
It's like
letter of
how
law.
the laws, letter of law. Yeah, that's it. That's
Yeah,
right there.
yeah.
And they just went around the letter of the law.
Gotcha. No, fair enough. No, and I guess at some point when you start going to these to the edges, you start seeing how silly some of these legislations that really are when you're trying to legislate certain things, and where you start seeing where it breaks. It's kind of like programming in that sense, right? Laws, right? They have them that you know that they had certain things in mind when they wrote these laws, and but when you put it into practice and you're trying to do something that's inherently silly, or that's where things start kind of falling apart. No, it's fascinating. I didn't know, all this stuff was on my radar kind of just in a nebulous way, but I didn't know any of the details. And that's something else that also excites me, this idea that the 3D printing or, the CNC milling, that's fascinating because now you can start, manufacturing stuff at home, in your backyard, and actually get pretty creative with it. Especially the CNC. I mean, I imagine you can mate it up to AutoCAD and really just start making replacement parts for your car, I guess, or no.
Right. I love the resurgence of the do it yourself culture. It's so great. Like it's the best. 'Cause I like to fix things. It's my favorite feeling when I can bring something back to life. Like it doesn't work, I come in there and then when I leave, it's working again. It's like that's a great feeling.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's funny, I've had a whole series of really old, crappy cars, right? So something will break. The dealership tells me it's $100 part, and I'm looking at it, and it looks like a 20-cent piece of plastic to me, but it's just the right shape. And how the heck am I going to make something like this? So out comes the duct tape, that I have to reapply every 10,000 miles to get the brittle off. Yeah.
Duct tape's amazing, that's for sure.
No, that's cool, man. So do you run Linux exclusively, or do you? Okay, you've managed to keep Windows at bay or keep it away.
Right? Yeah. So I don't play much games anymore, but even games now with Steam,
Right.
like they're bringing it in. Like it, it's just it's pretty much you know free to choose what you want nowadays. You're not pigeonholed into any sort of thing anymore. I like it.
The one thing that I noticed, so I've been doing this for a while, and a lot of the applications that people may want to run on Windows actually started off as Linux applications. They got so good, they ended up getting transported over, right? So, like one of the struggles early on was getting codecs to be able to play MP3s even or videos, right? Because they're all proprietary and nobody was sharing. So these guys were reverse engineering these codecs to be able to play files, And what blew my mind is like I had a couple of cases where like I'm running around with I'm evangelizing Linux, right? And my coworkers, I was probably annoying about it. But somebody's struggling to get like a Windows Media Player file to play on Windows Media Player, right? For some reason, the codecs report. I grab it, I plug it into my Linux machine, and VLC plays it just fine, with the reverse engineered codecs that work better than the official ones. So like VLC, that was a Linux app, and it solved a big problem that existed, which is, and like it could play everything. It got to a point where like, oh my god, you've got a Linux box, you can play any media, man. Throw it at me. The VLC can do anything. So now it's pretty common on Windows, right? Or Audacity to edit video or edit audio, or GIMP, which is kind of like a Photoshop alternative that I think is probably I don't know. I don't do it professionally, but it's probably pretty good. It's probably So been this progression of stuff. So now, well, maybe there's less reasons to run Windows.
Right? That's the one hold up that when I talk to people that they have is Adobe Suite. And I'm like,
Right.
okay, I get that, but they're getting better, man. Like video editing's getting better, photo editing is getting like original Linux when probably when you first start like sound drivers
Yeah.
were possibly hard to get to work, but there are a bunch of busy bees that they don't care about taking credit or anything, but they're like me. It's like when they get something to work, they get that feeling, and that's worth it enough.
Right. Yeah. No, exactly. So there's no zero production cost and manufacturing cost in software, right? So you solve the problem once, and you don't mind that your neighbors can also get to benefit from it. So, and that's the other thing that's impressed me. So in the beginning, yeah, like you said, it was you had to research what computer you had because it maybe the drivers wouldn't be compatible with the CPU or whatever, and nobody was providing. Intel wasn't cooperating. Nobody was cooperating with the open source movement. So everything was reverse engineered. So that was the challenge. Now, what amazes me, and maybe you've played with these, you can download a bootable CD. So basically now, and it's all reverse engineered, right? These guys just working away. So now as it's booting, it's automatically detecting and configuring your sound card, your internet, your video on the fly as it's booting. It's auto configuring, auto magically, they say, right? They Windows can't do that. You install into some safe mode. You have to install the drivers to get the video card to work or whatever, right? This as it's booting, man, and then it's just running off your USB drive. It's not even installed, right? It creates a RAM disk and it's just running off of that. But I mean, the fact that this mega corporation, Microsoft, can't keep up with these guys, this collection of computer savvy people, I to this day I still I think that's pretty cool, man. Just cooperation, right? That's what it is. People cooperating, eating the pants off those big corporations.
Right? So that spurs me to a few things I want to like. This you were saying about open source hardware, and this is catalyzing like to move forward for the open source hardware, right? So we have to some people have to make some money, and some things have to happen before that can move forward, and it will. I think it might be slow, but I had somebody have some criticism of something I was saying the other day because I'm an open source advocate. And they were like, well, how does anybody make money off of open
Mm.
source? My argument is this what I have found that solved it for me is like, well, Red Hat is the biggest, it was the biggest acquisition in the software world ever,
Yeah.
and so somebody made a lot of money there. So, and that was Red Hat's all began as an open source company.
Yeah, no, they are. And the way the model I think has always been that you provide services, not the products, because obviously the very nature of open source, it's been copy lefted, right? As Richard Stallman says. You can't really well, you could try to charge money for it, but you also have to give away the source code for free. So, yeah. So the way I picture when I see the IT guys at work, like a server goes down, well, they're stuck because it's Microsoft, it's proprietary. They don't have the source code. It's just binary files. Who the fuck knows, right? I mean, curse. So who knows, right? It's not working, and they're given some diagnostic tools, and a lot of the times you just reinstall and hope for the best. But if it was a Linux world where Microsoft never existed and Bill Gates was never born, and it was everything open source, then there'd be no limit to what they could fix it themselves. They could write a code, They could update the software. Like I think their jobs would be they would be more effective. Their jobs would be more enjoyable. I think their jobs would be more interesting because now they can actually you could maybe farm it out to a company like Red Hat and just have somebody take care of it for you if that's what you wanted, or you could roll up your sleeves and really get in there and see what went wrong. And maybe it's just a config file that needs tweaking. Maybe it's a glitchy program that you yourself can go in and fix. Um, so I think it'd be, and everybody's software would just run better. That's the other observation with Linux, right? It just runs. Once you get it up and running, right, it tends to be much more stable. So that's kind of how I view it.
Yeah, I love it. It's 'cause I could just do anything. So I get on like GitHub or GitLab and I'll just like browse around the repositories and be like, oh, this person has released all these CAD files. It's like, I don't know how to use CAD software that well, but all right, I'll just pull it down and mess around with it. And I'm just not afraid of breaking stuff or going. It's easy to undo what you've already done. Sometimes in Windows, if you do like you install the wrong thing, it's a bad day.
No, that's right. Yeah, you got it. I mean, there's definitely ways to screw up your Linux install, like in a matter of seconds. You drop into root and you delete the wrong version, but hard to recover. But yeah, for the most part, no, I hear you. It's not so brittle, right? Like a runaway program, a rogue program, it's not a big deal. You uninstall it, it tends to not bring the whole machine down. And I was thinking about that, a lot of times in Windows. Okay, I'll tell you a problem that I had when I was trying to update my computer that I hadn't updated in a long time. I had a 30 or 40 gigs worth of photographs and videos I wanted to back up, right? Um, and then I realized I had them in different hard drives. And I was consolidating all these documents, and anyway, and then I ended up with duplicate photographs, and it was just one folder with like 10,000 photographs. Well, it wasn't that 5,000 photographs, whatever. It's a massive amount. So I'm thinking, man, how do I organize this? Because I wanted to organize it by the date that the picture was taken, and in folders. Like when you import, even Windows does it. You import pictures, it organizes in folders by year, date, whatever, right? Well, it turns out that in Linux, it was just a matter of looking around. Script food. It was just a bash script. Somebody put up. It was like a little line, copied and pasted. It uses some of these standard built-in tools of the OS. It went through, scanned each photograph. It pulled the data, the metadata off the photograph. Based on that, it created a folder that was, and you could play with the format. Here's the keys for the format. So anyways, it was like a command that you could type. It was, one line long. And it went through my 5,000 photographs. It deleted duplicates. So it did it, and then, it did a checksum to make sure it was literally an identical file. If there were identical files, it deleted it. And then it put things into folders, right? So anyways, so it was just a matter of having the right information. I have to look that up because I'm not a guru. I'm not one of these bearded Linux gurus or whatever, right? But it's all there. And if it was Windows, because I noticed maybe I can do this on Windows, I'm probably stuck downloading some freeware. Who knows what payload it has? Who knows what kind of, you know, what kind of computer herpes I end up getting that can only by reinstalling Windows because there's no way to fix it, And but anyway, so that's one of the differences. Now I hear you. There's a lot you can do with it.
I think people get intimidated by the command line, right? It
Hmm.
is intimidating until you get some grammar work done.
Hmm.
And this was at the same time was about the same time I discovered the Trivium. Well, actually, I'd learned some Linux, and so I was a James Corbett fan for a long time, and that's
Yeah.
how I discovered Richard. And then once I heard Richard describe the Trivium in computer terms, input, process, output, I was like, oh, boom. I was off to the races then. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to learn as much about the Trivium as I can. And then it's just like backfill and understand more about computers than I ever even knew. It was great. It helped a ton.
So and then so I think I'm a little bit older than you. So when I came across Linux, see, the whole world was running DOS. So there was a command. It was all a command line, but the DOS command line was such a piece of garbage. Like when I first went into Linux, and the idea that you could see your command history and edit a previous command that you had edited was a revelation because in DOS you couldn't do that. like simple stuff like that, you know. So in Linux, you know, in the command line, you hit a typo, you can hit up on the arrow, and the command that you just issued comes up again. You can back arrow and edit it, and hit enter and reissue it. You couldn't do that in DOS. You couldn't do that in DOS for the longest time. I don't know which window. I mean, it was long after Windows had come out that they finally went through and started cleaning up the DOS command. So my introduction was to computing was really DOS. It was back in the DOS days, and before Windows even. So I never had that hurdle of intimidation with when the Linux. In fact, it was just like, oh my God, look, this is cool. You know, the first time I saw a Linux command prompt, you could edit commands. Things were color coded. Anyway, and
Right.
there's a logic to it. You know, so like you said, I think it looks kind of nebulous. One time, my brother, who's younger and never really got into it like I did, was looking over my shoulder, and I just had, you know, the window was maximized, so that's all I'm looking at is the terminal window, you know, and I'm typing commands, and you know, there's stuff whizzing by, and he's like, man, it's like a scene out of the Matrix, you know, because it looked mysterious, yeah.
Right, and that's what I get too, because I'll have, you know, just a square terminal up there, and I'll have a few commands like that I've already done for the day or whatever, and my wife will walk by and she'll like look at it, and she's like, "It looks so confusing," but now I tell her, I'm like, her laptop died a little while ago, so I was like, "All right, we're gonna get you a new laptop, but I won't have a Windows machine in my house anymore." So I have to teach her Linux. Pretty excited about that.
Well, you know what? And a lot of the new GUIs, I mean, they're so nice. If you don't want to ever see a terminal, you don't have to, right? You just install it. It's a GUI, and all the stuff you expect is there. Oh, Firefox, that's another open source application that existed on Linux, and then it was so good that it got ported to Windows. So you're probably already even using Firefox. So you know you're coming home when you go to Linux. You know,
Right. I abandoned Firefox a while ago.
what
I
do you
use it
use?
as a secondary browser. I use Brave browser now.
Sure,
I don't
yeah,
know if
okay,
you've I like that one. Uh I use Firefox if I gotta go to something where I don't need I can't have an ad blocker or whatever. Because
right.
Brave, it's all built in, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Which
No, which is cool.
kind
It's amazing how many times a website breaks because it's trying to do something nefarious. Maybe not
of
nefarious. It's like, yeah, what is going on here?
right. The way the internet has changed so much now, you know, it used to be you'd pull up a website, it would just be blocks of text. Now, you know, there's so much moving animations and everything. There's a lot, you know, there's a lot at play now.
So this might appeal to your geekier side. I came across this. I haven't used it, but back in the day, somebody had developed a text only and text based web browser that runs from your terminal. And I just came across it again, and I forgot the name of it, but I'm sure you can find it. I'm sure it's in your, might even be already in your Linux distro. But the reason I brought it up is somebody was saying whenever I browse the web, I'm almost always just looking for text to read text. I don't care about images or videos. So all these things are just distractions. So I prefer to use this text only web browser. I don't know how it works necessarily. I mean, I think you used to be able to navigate links and, you know, actually go navigate a website that way. And it did a decent job of kind of formatting it so that it was still readable. You could still read it. I mean, if it was originally organized in columns, it would line it up. But it's out there. You know, you can impress people with your Linux savvy.
Right. Yeah, I'm gonna have to check that out because that is a good. Sometimes I I'm into uh I said Richard's into like teaching everybody. I'm into like security, like
Mm,
all encompassing security. I
mhm,
don't know, probably because military stuff like that. So there's digital security, there's physical security, and then there's what I listened to this guy and he described it as security culture. And it's like if you to have actual security, you have to build a culture of it, right? So cuz what good's a door lock if you don't use it or anything like that? And I mean, a door is a nefarious person, and they're not going to let a door stop them, you know. So you make yourself a hard target. Well, so I tend to derp around on sketchy places on the
yeah.
internet. So a tool like this, it's good for exploring and insulating yourself. So because there are too many drive-by installs and stuff like that nowadays. It's not good.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. That's the other thing I was thinking about. Just actually before we got on the phone call, because I wanted to talk to you about Linux, right? Thinking that's one of the things that I appreciate. I guess I feel pretty secure, you know, and especially all the exploits. And Windows has gotten admittedly better, but even during the days of Windows 95, new Windows 98, it was ridiculous. Like a fresh install of Windows 95 just out on the net, nobody's using it, but a worm would come along and install itself, and 2 days later, and this thing's infested and unusable, and I would just laugh. That's ridiculous. And my friends that only ran Windows, I guess like I said, maybe I didn't take the most sensitive approach. But I was like, what a piece of garbage, man. There's like no such thing as a worm that's ever been spotted for Linux. And I think a lot of it is just that it's, well, you see the value of many eyes looking at at the software and looking for exploits. Because one of the things they used to say back then is like, wow, Linux is so tiny. It's like, well, no, it's not. It's tiny in the desktop market, but all the servers are running Linux, right? And that's what you want to go after. And yet still, all the exploits are Windows only, man. Right? There's fundamentally something flawed with how that software is put together, and the whole thing's a mess. So I saw a headline. I haven't looked into it. I don't know if it's true, but apparently Windows 10 has a Linux kernel now, or they're integrating a Linux kernel. Have you heard about this? Is it true?
I have, and so there's a guy that I follow. He's a Linux guy, but so Windows just recently got into the single board computer game also. So
Mm.
they use the Linux kernel and they made their own uh, ARM processing uh, operating system. So it uses the Linux kernel and then it spins up into Windows land, where everything's proprietary. But I also heard that, yeah, something about the next generation of Windows is going to be totally the Linux kernel. And I just imagine, uh, you know, I can't remember the guy's name, the guy that makes the kernel for Linux.
Linus
He's from
Torvalds, or
Torvald. Yeah, Linus Torvald. He's just laughing. I
yeah.
know it.
It's funny. This has happened, I guess, before. So like that was the Unix. That was kind of the backbone of the internet before Linux or Windows came around. Was mostly created by students and people in their free time collaborating. Then IBM and HP and all these companies came in and just co-opted it. They stole it. They, maybe made some minor tweaks, claimed it for themselves, and then persecuted anybody else that was using it. Right? They literally stole it. So, and a lot of lawsuits ensued, and finally, like the good guys won, but after whatever 5, 6 years of litigation, so Unix ended up becoming just a proprietary operating system that was really stolen from people that got together and put it together, collaborated on it. I think that there were a couple of free Unix versions that survived after the lawsuit. BSD maybe. I never used it. I never really got into other Unix. So then Richard Stallman, that I think is the unsung hero of the open source software, he's the one that came up with the philosophy around Linux, which is the idea of copyleft, right? Because it's the opposite of copyright. So most open source software is copylefted. And what that means is that, fine, you can take the source code and do whatever you want with it. There's only one restriction. You can't keep other people from seeing your source code and accessing your. So the idea is, so anyways, we'll see. I don't know if Microsoft, what they're up to, but I thought that was interesting because this kind of happened before, but before we didn't have copyleft, and Richard Stallman's the new group. And anyway, so he's I think I haven't listened to his take on. Thought like,
I've,
let's see what happens now.
I've listened to him some, and I like him, but I mean, on politics, I disagree with him. He's a Bernie Sanders fan. I know
Mm-hmm.
this because I've listened to interviews with him.
Mm-hmm.
But that does not negate all the work he's done. Like,
Yeah.
you know, he he's a very smart guy. He won't use like Skype or
Right,
anything
right,
proprietary. He's
right.
and I mean, that's his choice, and I got a lot of respect for that.
It's
Stands
hard.
on his principles.
It's hard to do, right? No, it's hard to do it. That's the thing, exactly, right? That it's hard to do. I mean, obviously, I install all these codecs on Linux. The principle kind of gets back to what you're talking about in security, because the moment Linux is great, but the moment you're running a proprietary binary only piece of software, all hands are off because you don't really know what it's doing, really. It's logging keystrokes, it's storing passwords. So that's where that stands. And in fact, some people were really like they were. So even if like okay, so let's say you're in a pure Linux only, no proprietary software system, right? Like what Richard Stallman would probably advocate. Well, the thing is, if the machine that source code was compiled on was compromised, because you could have the compiler that's turning your source code into binaries insert backdoors automatically. You would never know as a programmer, right? So what you need is you need access to the process. I mean, every aspect of the computer needs to be also open source and open to inspection, I guess. So anyway, so it's theoretical, like getting to this point where like you really are in control of your machine is theoretical. But what Richard Stallman, I know he advocates that, right? It's not very practical. So there is kind of a middle path there. I mean, me too. I couldn't be on this phone call with you on my Linux box. I really stuck to my guns.
Right. And I mean, I totally he's trending us in the correct direction, right? And so I have to have these tools to be able to do certain things first. And so I can like point to him and be like, this guy, he's got it, this is how it should be done. I'm not quite there yet, but yeah. So, there are with the open source hardware, because if you put a mainstream processor inside one of your computers, those are big corporations and they have connections, and
Yeah.
there are really nefarious things on there, unfortunately, sometimes. But there are new sort of up and comers with the open source hardware movement
Mm.
that they're going to unlock this in the next probably 5-10 years easily. So it'll be like you order all the parts and you can build it. I mean, you could build a computer from scratch now, but more so even, and all the call outs and everything like this. You're monitoring what your system is doing. You own your system, and
Right.
that's the ideal.
Yeah, that's where it comes from. It's funny. I got so originally I got very steeped into Linux, and I was really into the philosophy behind it because that's what it is, right? I saw our society was becoming digitized, and computers were gonna start running a bigger part of our life. And if you don't really know what the computer's really doing, then it seems scary that they were going to become these black boxes that we couldn't control or open or investigate, or build or tweak. If all our finances, I don't know, the politics now, the political machineries depending on it for voting or whatever, right? So it seemed like a really scary future, right? So that was kind of a big part of it, exactly what you just said. You don't really control it. You don't really know what the computer had access to the source code. And for me, it's theoretical. I'm not a programmer. I took some programming classes, right, a long time ago, but I know that there's a big community of people out there, and then the results kind of speak for themselves. How well the software runs, how well it tends to run. So,
Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain is what they say.
well,
Now, like, I'll be the man behind the curtain, thanks.
that's right. Yeah. No, and you know what? And I'm thinking too, like, okay, fine, the NSA, I'm sure they have a way of getting into my Linux box, but your average hacker is going to be stumped. So I'm protected from a little bit protected from that just by running on a proper OS.
Right? And I just say, like, e- everybody, like anybody could be targeted, right?
Hmm.
So it's either the needle in the haystack or like the eye of Sauron. As long as you don't get the eye of Sauron focused in on you, you could probably operate pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey man, one last thing that we kind of chatted about was you were playing with your diet, right? You were doing keto, or you were thinking about doing keto.
So my wife and I have been keto. So before we moved, we were keto for about a year, and then we had our roommate come with like our this guy. I knew him before, after the motorcycle accident, before we moved out here, and then he moved away for a while, and he came back. But then he moved in with us because he was in a bad situation, and he's actually in this course also, and my wife is in this course.
Oh,
So
that's great. Okay, that's awesome.
right? So my wife and I were already on our diet, so he was living with us and he didn't have a job or anything. So we fed him. It's like, well, I'm not gonna buy special food for you. You're gonna eat what we eat. So he got on our diet. He's so he's lost over 100 pounds. I couldn't tell you exactly how much, but now his
Mm,
fitness is he's more fit than he's ever been his whole life. He turned 21 in September, and then I'm
mhm.
31, and then my wife is 28. But yeah, so we have been so intermittent fasting, and then keto was our like big introduction into the diet lifestyle. And now I was skeptical of the carnivore diet a lot. And then now I keep hearing so many good things from people in this course. I was like, okay, it's not enough to just be skeptical. I actually have to give it a try for myself and then see what it does. So I'm gonna do some more digging, and I gotta figure out like what sort of meals to build upon, and that's like my next step how we implement it. But I do intermittent fasting. I'm pretty good at staying. I can usually stay in a 6 hour eating window and then fast the rest of the time. But sometimes I'll drop it to 8 hours.
So, what got you started with keto? What was there something that prompted you to get started, or was it you read it was supposed to be good, so you felt good, or
So I wanted to be so my security mindset. If I'm as in peak physical condition as I can be,
mm,
that makes me more of a hard target. Less vulnerable, if you will. So and stamina. I'm not a huge person, but I'm tall. So stamina, I think, is like a big one. So I wanted to have a diet that would carry me the long haul if I needed. So I was watched a lot of Joe Rogan podcasts, and he had a nutrition expert, Dr. Rhonda Patrick, and yeah, she was a pretty good advocate of the keto diet. So that's where we started.
did you notice any effects or any changes? How did it make you feel?
So the fasting thing, it makes me sharp. Like when I'm at work,
Mm,
I don't like I start my day. Sometimes I start really early in the morning, but then I eat when I come home. Uh Sometimes if I'm undisciplined, I'll break my fast during the day. And I've noticed after lunch or after I eat that meal, I'm not as sharp. Uh Things don't tend to go as smooth. Uh I don't know. It's just that extra. My body is working on too many things, like it's trying to digest that. I don't know if it's this or not, but it's digesting that food. It's just a lot of things going on while I'm trying to like use my body to do work.
yeah, no, that's interesting. Yeah, no, I've noticed. I mean, I've experienced similar things. I do feel better. And then for me, once I was able to divorce myself from food, constant food, because I used to get weak and hangry if lunch was late. I was one of those people, right? I ate breakfast, then if lunch was out half an hour, I was not doing well. And then to go to a point where like food, no food, I haven't done any extended fasts, but like if I have to skip lunch or, I've had it beat me. I'm traveling for work and, so basically I eat dinner and then I don't eat again for another 24 hours. Um, and without really any major discomfort. I'm working, I'm active, I'm walking around, you know, 24 hours without food. As long as I've got water, I'm okay. So it made me feel it's like I felt stronger. I felt like um, well, I joked with my wife, that was my superpower. I don't need food. You know? And then I did start noticing other stuff that like mental clarity for sure. And maybe there's some wisdom encoded in our language, right? Because when we say somebody's hungry, we mean that they're a go-getter and they're sharp and or they're out there doing stuff, right? It's only after a big meal that your couch has.
Right. It your body's focused on that after you because it thinks it's completed its task for the day. Because we're hunter gatherers, kind of. It's like, oh well, I got my food for the day. Now I'm just gonna chill out.
Yeah,
I don't know. That makes sense. It does to me.
yeah, yeah. No, hey, makes sense to me, man. So, all right. Well, as long as you're being guided about why what makes you feel good, and there's a lot of research out there too. If you're curious about carnivore, Stephenson, right, in The Fat of the Land, you probably came across that. That was pretty interesting. And that was kind of I think a lot of people's first introduction because it sounds so extreme. It's the opposite of the official dietary guidelines, right? So I think that's a big hurdle. Um, it's so well accepted that fruit and vegetables is where health is at. So it took me a lot of reading. Some people are maybe a little more intuitive. I had to really kind of look into it. And then I thought like, okay, well, I'm not going to kill myself and try it. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, we live the more I knew we lived in an upside down world, but I didn't know it was literally upside down. Okay, if I take this pyramid and flip it on its head, then it's probably more correct. Oh, I don't- yeah.
You're not getting your essential carbs. That's a trick
Oh man.
question. There's no such thing as an essential carb, right? So, um,
Right.
well, Kurt, this is about the end of my lunch hour, but this was a lot of fun, man. I'm glad we got to geek out on Linux, and I didn't even get to ask you about the file system. That's what you were posting. You were doing the
Well, sorry, what was it?
you posted something about the interplanetary file system. Is that what it was?
Oh yeah, yeah. I was derping around with that, trying to get it to work. Cause you know, I know that a lot of people are making steps to get their like Luke Rudowski. Unfortunately, all his stuff I think is hosted on YouTube. It's like,
Mm,
well, I know Linux. I can write a script to rip down all his videos and just once I figure out how IPFS works, that's what I want to. You know, I just like to nerd out and figure things out.
that's awesome, man. Well, we can talk. You can teach me about that. I know nothing about it, just high level. I've never installed it. I've never played with it. That's what I noticed that you posted. I was like, that looks like a Linux box. I want to talk to this guy.
Right? Awesome. I appreciate it. It was great talking to you too.
No, I mean, yeah, this was really enjoyable. So, well, I'm glad we got a chance to meet, and yeah, we'll see you on the Discord server sometime, right?
Totally. And hopefully I can in my office I'll record a call with this sometime too. So yeah. We'll talk to you soon, Luis.
That sounds good, Kurt. Talk to you later. See you, man.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too. Bye bye.